Was Jesus a socialist? Well, he couldn't have been a socialist in the proper sense of that term because Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels hadn't written their Communist Manifesto until 1847. So it wasn't a concept, it wasn't a word. However, we have some insights about Jesus' values, priorities, and perspectives. In Luke chapter 4, his very first sermon that he preached, his hometown of Nazareth, he asked for the Isaiah scroll, and he reads from it. He gets to the point where it says, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, the year of Jubilee, which was the redistribution of wealth. Every 7 or 70 years, in theory, the ancient Hebrews would redistribute wealth to wipe debts clean. If a farmer had some bad years and was indebted to the neighbor, they would restore things and have a fresh start, a reset every 7 or 70 years or so. Now, Jesus was actually calling for that because he says this is fulfilled in your presence. And perhaps it's not an accident that they nearly tried to push him off the cliff right after that first sermon. Now in Acts chapter 2, we see how those early followers began living. In verse 43, all who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. And in Acts chapter 4, starting at verse 32, the believers were of one heart and soul. No one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common, and they distributed as each had need, as any had need. So those words suggest that Marx and Engels were quite familiar with Jesus and the Gospels and Acts, and that very well perhaps informed what they were doing. Jesus, no doubt, was opposed to exploitation and economic oppression under any economic system. So if a socialist is being exploitive, oppressive, he would be opposed to that. Capitalist, he'd be opposed to that. But it does seem to me that his words and values and teachings and those of his followers lean more in the socialist direction than the capitalist direction. What do you think?